most recently, what I do is I act as Scott's production manager. And so we've had a lot of requests since Scott teamed up with Michael Grumley about helping you guys do self-publishing. So we wanted to be able to come here and offer you guys the opportunity to ask very specific questions rather than going and hearing somebody just talk about the generics of self-publishing, because it's grown a lot and audiobooks have grown, and so we wanted to kind of give you an overall history of what the industry is now and let you guys know that you can do it. It's that, dreams are coming true everywhere. So we want to give you the encouragement to go out there, and if that's what you want to do, we want you to do it. So I want to start with Michael, and he's going to tell the story about how he got into self-publishing, because he has sold over a million books. So he is self-published, and his books are awesome, and Scott has narrated them, and we'll get to that, but we're going to do like a little timeline and explain everything, and then we're going to mostly have questions, so that because we want to be here for you guys. Okay? So tell us the story.
Off you go.
Off I go. So how many people here are interested in writing a book or in the process?
Or have written.
Okay. And how many people are here more on the narration? Okay. It's usually the other way around, because Scott's a lot more interesting than I am. So Gina was actually talking about the self-publishing, and as you guys probably know, back in 2007, everything started to change when Amazon came out with their Kindle. And that actually allowed potential writers to publish directly and not have to go through agents and publishers, which is a bit like winning the lottery. It's really, really difficult. And so that actually changed a lot of things. And so you had this big push now by indie writers into the Kindle market, and that has just accelerated over the last several years. Now there is, between Kindle readers and Kindle fires, there are now 50 million of those devices out there. Right? So these are a lot of potential readers that can be reached if you're looking to publish. I talked to a lot of writing groups, and one of the questions I asked them is how many people, in fact I'll ask you guys the same thing, how many people that raised their hand and said that they're interested in writing a book or in the process of writing a book are considering going the traditional publishing route, which is the agent and the publisher? Okay. How many people are thinking about doing the self-publishing? Okay, good. Well, it's interesting, and I want to be careful. I don't know who's in the audience. This is not a traditional publisher bashing session. This is really more about, a whole nother set of options or opportunities that a lot of people don't think about. But it sounds like a lot of you have already looked at the self-publishing option. So, to make the short story very long, I started writing. I wrote my very first book in 2013, and I wrote it really more as a bucket list item than anything else. And I put it up on Kindle, and I did a lot of things wrong. I had a terrible cover. I tried to edit it myself. In fact, if all of you leave this room with only one thing that you remember, it is actually two things. Do not do your own cover.
Yeah, never.
Ever. Unless you are just the most kick-ass graphic artist, do not do your own. Okay, you can do your own cover. You're the only one that can do your own cover.
Okay.
The second is, don't do your own editing, because writers make terrible editors, especially of their own work, right? Because you're paying attention to so many things as you're reading through your book. It's so easy to miss everything. So anyway, I did a lot of things wrong. I just put it up there just because I thought, what the hell, and I'll move on, I'll take it off my bucket list. But then, a few months later, I actually made a couple $1,000, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And I started writing another book, and I started working on some promotions, and I started giving away a lot of books, which you should not be afraid to do. When I talk with these writing groups, there's a real apprehension about giving away their books for free. I've given away almost, 750,000 books for free. But I've sold well over 1 million books, right? Especially if you give away one and you've got a sequel behind it, or another one behind it. For me, it was all about, it wasn't really about making money, it was about growing my reader base. And I wanted my books, even if it was for free, to show up on as many of those 50 million Kindle devices as possible. eventually they read it and hopefully buy another book. So anyway, kind of fast forward, now I've got, I guess, 8 books out, and once they started doing really well, I thought, wow, you know what, I need to turn these into audiobooks, and I need somebody really, really awesome to do it. And Scott Brick is about as awesome as you get when it comes to narrating audiobooks. And so I reached out to Gina, and we started talking, and things really worked out. Obviously,
it took a year though. That's why I'm scratching my head, because I didn't know who he was, and then I found out how awesome he was, and then I said, sure, let's work together.
Right, and you know, Scott's obviously very busy too. He's got a lot of people coming to him, so there was a bit of a waiting. But anyway, that's kind of the transition. We can talk a little bit more about specifics and things to do and not to do when you're self-publishing. But maybe this is a good segue into Scott's background, which is actually a lot more interesting than mine, because he goes back much further in this industry. He kind of helped start the whole narration. And
what's the #1 rule? Don't do your own covers.
Okay.
It's so true.
Yes, we will be quizzing you, so pay attention.
It's true. People take the first bite with their eyes. And I'll tell you from my perspective, because authors, the industry's changing, and more often than not, narrators are working directly with the author. When the narrator has to assess the project and say, is this going to be a moneymaker for me? Am I going to be able to make, can I support my family doing this project? The first thing that we talk about in our Facebook forums are basically, does the author get it? And by that I mean, have they done their own cover? Have they, if you haven't invested, let's say, a modicum of it, you can find, there's actually, the name of the website escapes me now. If you Google book covers, there's so many out there, so many designs that you could license for a very affordable rate, maybe $100, $150 max. For a decent looking cover that isn't something you've done yourself and doesn't look like something you've done yourself. Well, the very first thing we're asking ourselves is, has this author invested in themselves? Brett Battles is a self-published author that I work with, and he has a friend, another author, one of his dearest friends, who is a graphic artist, and he's amazing, kick-ass books. So he's always like, hey Rob, can you do this? Sure. One author doing a cover for another one. I'd work for Brett any day of the week. And narrators get wondering, do they get it in the sense of, are they ready to do their own marketing? Because when you're in self-publishing, there's no publisher behind you. You don't have their media machine. You don't have them putting your title in, Baker and Taylor to make sure that, Barnes and Noble has, hard copies, or to put it in the library system. There's nobody doing that work except for you. And a lot of authors will come to a narrator and say, hey, can we partner on this? And we ask very simple questions. What's your marketing strategy? If the answer is,
what's a marketing strategy?
Right, yeah. It's like, I can't partner with you. Because I can't do all the marketing myself. I will do as much as I possibly can, but it's your work. So I can't be doing, it's your gig. I'll do my part, but anyway. So these are things that we look for. Are they self-motivated? Are they into the idea of doing marketing? In Michael's case, you had had the first 2 books already narrated, and you wanted them redone.
Yeah, I needed them redone by somebody who basically was, better known.
Well, the reason I bring this up is because he had already paid to have them done. He already had the first 2 available, and they were profitable. He was already making money. And so when he tells me, he wants me to take over the series, I'm like, great, we pick up from book 3. He says, no, I want me to redo books 1 and 2. Instantly, I said, I'm on board. Not because I wanted the money for books 1 and 2, but because I knew if he's willing to give up something that is already profitable and take a hit until it becomes profitable again, this is a guy who's motivated. And I'm on board. To me, that's the coin of the realm.
So we want to be able to, give you some pointers. Let's ask some questions in the audience. So how do you guys come up, if you're working on a book currently, how did you come up with your topic?
just for a second. We're going to be opening up for questions. If you guys can head up to this microphone, anybody
Just
who
so that
has
everybody else
questions,
can
make sure that
hear,
everybody
because
can hear it.
we want to be able to have everybody learn.
Can you repeat the last question?
Yes.
Yeah, so the question was, how do I reach potential readers in a nonfiction market? Is that correct? So I write fiction, but I think a lot of the things that I've learned, a lot of the tools, and the tips and tricks that I've learned carry over into that, especially in terms of getting off the ground. Like I said, don't be afraid to give away something for free. If you're just going to write one book and that's going to be it, well, that might be a little bit of a challenge, right? But if you think that you're going to write a few books, then there's nothing wrong with building that reader base. And like Scott said, I mean, you have to really kind of invest. And there's a lot of different ways to invest. That's probably one of them. What's interesting is, anybody in here heard of Kindle Direct Publishing?
Yeah.
Excellent. So Kindle Direct Publishing, for those of you who don't know, is that's essentially the platform that you go to. You can Google it, and that's where you can open up an account and upload your book, and it's, the cover and the contents, and there's all a series of steps, but it's really pretty straightforward. But what's really interesting about Kindle Direct Publishing is they give you this really great option, and this is something I would strongly recommend if this is a route that you guys decide to go. Is you can publish on multiple platforms, like Barnes & Noble and Kobo, and there's, iBooks and all kinds of things. But Amazon through KDP will tell you, if you want to publish only through us, exclusively through us, for 3 months, 90 days, we will give you access to some marketing tools that other writers wouldn't normally have. And so again, it's only a commitment for 90 days. You can get out of it every 90 days if you want to, but I've actually stayed in the whole time. What they allow you to do is do a couple of very special promotions. One is to give away free books for up to 5 days. You can run a free promotion. They will actually help advertise that for you and get it out to people. And you can have people download anywhere from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands over the course of 5 days. Which, imagine, even if only 1 out of 10 people actually read your book, that is a huge step forward in building a reader base. The second option is you can do like a countdown deal, what they call. So you can, instead of going away for free, you can say, all right, well, it's normally priced, say, at $5.99 or whatever your price point is. I'm going to go away for 99 cents or $1.99 for that period of time. So you make a little bit of money. You have less downloads, but you probably have a higher number or proportion of people that are actually going to read your book. But anyway, these are marketing tools that are online that are really very, very helpful. And you can do book signings. Book signings are obviously very popular. I used to say popular. A lot of people like the idea of doing a book signing. Book signings are going to lose you money. I will tell you that book signings are usually for more of the ego of the author, or maybe just the kind of that one-to-one relationship, or the meeting people kind of face-to-face. It's not going to make you any money. You may spend $300 or $400 actually spending time and money and material to try to actually do that, and maybe you sell $100 or $200 a book. So anything that you can do online, especially with Amazon and some of their tools that I just told you about, makes a huge difference, because you can reach millions, well, let's say thousands or tens of thousands of people at the same time, whereas something that might be more direct, a book signing or something like that, is going to be reaching tens of people. So I would strongly recommend, if you're thinking the self-publishing route, to start thinking in terms of online promotions, because it will make a huge, huge difference.
There's also something, before we get to the next question, there's always going to be conversations online about your subject, whatever you're writing about, and whatever you are the voice of the expert about, whether the voice of authority about, whether it's, naval warfare in the 20th century or 90 Days for a Better Prostate. I mean, whatever subject your book is about, there are going to be people online talking about it. There's going to be a community. On Reddit, on Twitter, there'll be Facebook groups dedicated to it, likely. It is in your best interest to participate in the conversation. Whenever there's a conversation online, to whatever degree the subject is trending, whether it actually is or not, if it's just trending within a very small community, talk about it. Insert yourself into the conversation. Ask other people questions. That's the best way to engage people online. Jonathan Mayberry, go read read any of his social media feeds, and he'll be like, hey, you know what? I'm writing this today. What are you reading today? Man, that dude gets feedback like crazy. Ask a question. But more than anything else, you are making yourself familiar to your audience. There's a narrator who works all the time, and she got her start by participating in Facebook forums and other online conversations. It just got to the point where people just recognized her name. She had become ubiquitous. People were like, well, of course she's part of the conversation. So the publishers are reading those. Like, well, who should we get? Oh, why don't we get her? And it helps that she's really good, but that was how she kind of got her start, is just making herself relevant.
And it takes time. You know,
Yeah.
The old adage of the marathon, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's very much the case. So
Yeah.
you need to be in it for the long haul and be patient. I mean,
And research your subject, and you want to know who's out there. If you're writing a book about roller skaters, then you need to know who else has a book out there about roller skaters, and how is it different and the same as what's out there.
I just have a question, except for Ken. This book is based on comics and how to do comics.
Mhm.
Would you have to advertise in smaller conventions in their guides or
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
as opposed to something like this?
Oh yeah, no, always start small.
Sure.
yeah, the,
always
the
start small.
broader it is, the less relevant it's going to be.
Yeah.
For sure.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Huh?
I'm writing and I've been working on it for like ever, an authorized biography about a singer who actually is from the States but lives in Europe.
From the States and sings in Europe.
Got their start by living here and
Okay.
did open mic nights and won a competition and ended up
Okay.
performing the rest of their lives in Europe. And however, I know that there's a fan base for this person, which happens to be my cousin, and in Germany, in Europe. However, I want to be able to also create a fan base here, like in regards to the book or getting the book done. I was wondering if there was any advice on how to, I don't know, she's not a public figure here, but she's like, kind of popular in Switzerland, Germany, Austria, France, and still performs. So there's a base for me to actually sell books at the concerts. But I want to know how, I want to launch the book here. And it's my first book, so any advice you could give me?
Well, I'll tell you that the United States, and I think this is relevant, even if she is better known in Europe, the United States is by far the biggest book market on the planet. And the UK is about 1/10 the size of the US, and I think Europe is probably about 1/3 of the UK. Now, that's partially because there's multiple languages in Europe, so not all books are published in
Or I
English.
have to get it translated as well?
Potentially, but there's a lot of people that in Europe that speak English, and there are a lot of English books that are actually bought in the European market. And Germany actually is pretty big. I wouldn't be afraid to try to market it here. I think people, by and large, a lot of people enjoy reading stories about people from other areas of the world, so I don't think that would be a problem. I think just the fact that the U.S. market is so large, I would certainly spend some time trying to market in the U.S. because your efforts may actually go a lot further as a result.
I would also talk to an attorney, because you're writing a book about somebody and they have the rights to their life.
Oh, no, it's my cousin.
Oh.
And my first cousin, and the reason why we want, and she lived with Nina Simone and lived with Bo Diddley and won a competition, ended up performing in Europe, and so, that's the story, but in regards to the marketing part of it, I know that it's just a compelling, I've been working on it for 7 years. I've written it once, and now I'm going back to make sure it's polished before I pass it off to someone. But I'm trying to figure out, how do I find the market here? And one of the ideas I have, maybe this isn't good, I discovered a list online about all of the record stations. So I'm thinking maybe I send a free copy of the book to the record stations all over the country.
Potentially. That could be expensive and fairly effective.
Radio stations, not radio stations.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a bit of a stretch, right? I mean, well, it's a lot of people tend to do things like that, and so a lot of these people receive a lot of books.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try it. I mean, maybe there's something kind of unique about your situation that draws attention. But I will say that if you actually publish a book on Amazon, there are many, many categories to choose from, and a lot of those are international type of categories or niche categories that you can put that in, so people are actually looking specifically for stories like that, and that may be pretty effective.
I'm sorry. You keep mentioning Amazon. I wanted to know your advice, because there are a lot of people out there who are charging you $5,000, $8,000 in order to help you self-publish. I wanted to know what they
Sure.
actually are saying that, you just shouldn't do Amazon because they don't give you a hard book cover. You'll never get a hard book cover through them, and all kind of stuff that sounds negative in regards to Amazon.
What I can tell you is this, and I want to be very careful about the way I say this. In my experience of all the other authors that I've talked to that have gone that route, a lot of these are smaller publishers or niche publishers. I've talked to dozens that have actually published through these small publishers that wanted some money up front, and they would actually go to work, and I don't know a single writer that has made any money. Or actually, in fact, I don't know a single writer that has not lost money by doing that.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that there's not publishers out there that can and would do well by that, but I would be a little skeptical of people that want money up front with a lot of promises.
And you can always pay to have your book made.
But yeah, and you can actually look at you can look at some of these publishers and see who they have represented and contact these other authors and ask them, hey, what do you think of that experience?
They have those people say, oh, I just, finished this book design, we made, $2,000 in the first 6 weeks. And so, they have people speaking on their behalf. I don't have access to these people.
YouTube.
You can
Twitter.
find them online.
The easiest place to find somebody.
Or emails.
Twitter.
Yeah, they have a lot of them have websites now that you can go to and contact. So I would certainly try that.
But also, I would find people who've worked with them that they're not using their pull quote, that they're not endorsing it. That's a bit more realistic to find out what it's like.
Yeah, a lot of these small publishers, in my experience, make money off you, not off selling books.
Hi. I was wondering what your thoughts were about series. So when you have a series going, in traditional publishing, you release one, then you wait a little while, release two. Is there an advantage in self-publishing to do it all at once if you've got the books ready to go, or do you want to do it like traditional publishing does?
So how about if I answer from the publishing and you can answer from the audio side?
Sure.
Yeah, so you don't want to release them all. I've seen people release them all at once. There's certainly an upside to that, where if you can get a lot of people to read the first book and they like it, the second book is already out, because people obviously don't like waiting for the second book. So there's something real about that approach. There's something valid about that approach. On the other hand, most people, it's a risk, because if you wait, for example, to write 3 books so you can release them all at once, it may not go anywhere. I mean, this is like throwing darts, right? It's the same with the music industry and the movie industry and all this. You don't know what's going to catch people's interest, what's going to tickle their fancy. You don't know what's going to be successful. So it's like throwing at the wall and seeing what sticks. The problem is you may actually release a series that just doesn't resonate. I've got books in a different series, and they don't sell nearly as well as my main series that sells extraordinarily well. So the problem is that the risk is if you actually spend 1.5 years or 2 years or 3, whatever it takes to write those 3 books, and nothing happens, you've just wasted 3 years, right? So what I typically recommend when I talk to writing groups is, if you're considering doing something like that, I recommend writing like 3 completely different storylines, because that way you have a better chance of one of those catching fire, right? My first one is the one that kind of cut the bug or whatever, but at least that way you have a better idea, a better chance, a more diverse chance of getting some momentum, and then start writing that series. And the other thing I'll say before I ask Scott is that don't ever write a book that you cannot turn into a sequel, ever. I have seen so many instances of writers, especially independent writers, that write this really kick-ass first book, and then they end it, and they end it in a way that there's nowhere to go. And it turns out that that's the one that catches fire. It's like the movie Gladiator, right? Russell Crowe's like, I told them not to kill me at the end. I told them not to do it. That's exactly what happened, right? So make sure that you leave yourself some way to turn it into a series, or at least a sequel, because it might be the one.
I was doing a book signing with Steve Barry. I record his Cotton Malone books, and there's got to be 200-300 people in the room, and I'm moderating. I'm trying to act all learned and stuff, and so I'm trying to ask a very literary question. I said, well, Alexander Dumas, he killed D'Artagnan. Agatha Christie, she killed Poirot and Miss Marple. So I'm just curious, is there an end point that you can see for Cotton Malone? He goes, that's got to be the dumbest idea I ever heard of. But the series they're wonderful things. And the problem, if you put everything out at once, is that you don't get to benefit from the conversation among the listeners, among the readers, right? The best thing that can happen is over the, let's say, a year between books 1 and 2, people start talking about it, right? There's a genuine grassroots interest that comes up among people like us. We're all fans at heart. I go to a bookstore, I ask people, what are you reading nowadays? Oh, you gotta read these books, the breakthrough books by Michael Grumley. Well, if they're already out, then the conversation is over before it's begun. So, also there's a saying in publishing, it's about front list and back list. The front list is the new book, the back list is whether it's the book immediately previous or all of the previous books. Front list sells back list. How do you sell a book that's been out for a year or more? How do you sell a book that's been out for 20 years? You put a new one out in a series. And people go, ooh, that, volume 18 looks really wonderful. I should read 1 through 17. Yeah, you should.
Thank you.
Of course.
So, hello, I know, I'm sure, online there are tons of advice, some good, some bad.
Can you talk closer?
Thank you, I thought I was really loud. Is there any tool that we can use that can help us navigate through the self-publishing? Something so beautiful as a checklist with advice on where to go to get assistance, or is it just truly a matter of looking through the internet and trying to weed through the good and bad?
So it's kind of a funny question, only in the sense that there's good advice out there and there's bad advice. I think the more generalized advice in terms of beginning, the basic things you want to do, the book, the covers, like Scott said, you can go out and you can Google, there's all kinds of people that actually help you do a good cover and good editing, and all kinds of things like that. I mean, those steps are fairly common practice, and so there's going to be a lot of advice to kind of walk you through that, and I think that's good advice. The bad advice, and this is where I might get kicked out of Comic Con by telling you this, is that it's not uncommon. I might get this. It is not uncommon, whether it's a conference or especially like a writer's conference. I'm trying to think how I can say this just right. There's a lot of authors that may be well known or not so well known that give a lot of really great advice. That sounds like great advice, but they sell no books. Because you can go online and there's tools that you can use and you can estimate how much people are actually selling, how many books, and how much they're probably making. The big names, Lee Childs and Dan Brown, something like that, I mean, that's pretty safe. But there's a lot of, and I can't begin to say, there's so many people out there that are billed as experts, and maybe they had a very successful book 20 years ago or something, or they had a successful book, maybe didn't do as well as they thought. But I can't tell you how many times I've actually sat and listened to somebody and looked them up on my computer, and I can tell you they make about $50 a month. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, because there's multiple reasons to write. I mean, a lot of times you just love to write, and that is totally great. But I will say that I think that most people, even if it's just a love of writing that you're in it for, you still want to be read. And you need to be able to get your books in the hands of people to actually read them. But most of these people, a lot of these people give advice, and they can't sell any books themselves. And so you want to be careful in terms of who you listen to for advice. In terms of setting things up and the steps to go to, like I said, to go through in terms of getting it online and things, mistakes not to make. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in that. But when it comes to experts telling you how to sell books, kind of like the small publisher that we're talking about, publishing houses, there's a lot of expertise that is probably not as valid as you think. So it's something that you have to kind of feel out. And like Scott said, I mean, you can track all these people down. You can do some research, you can talk to them, or you can talk to other people. But do a little bit of homework.
What about from the other direction? Same question, different direction. The publisher's side of the house always say, oh, there's so much you don't know. You need us to help walk you through that. And you may be right, but I don't know what I don't know. Is there any tool, book, resource, something that we can use to help get smart on that? Yeah, so we can learn before we stumble. Do you know of any?
I think the best tool that's out there isn't really, it's not a tutorial of any kind. It's a conversation with other self-published authors. Go on Facebook and search through the groups and look for self-publishing, self-published authors, that kind of thing. Because there's nothing like, speaking from my perspective, when a new narrator asks a question about working with an author, I send them to, there's a new narrator, an ACX narrator forum. Basically, ACX is where authors and narrators meet. It's like Match.com for the publishing industry. Anyway, crowdsource the information. People ask me a question, I'm like, I don't work with authors as much as somebody else. The advice from somebody who works with an author, every one of their clients is an independent author. I'm like, you want to go to them for advice rather than me. I do it with a handful of times, but I'm like, this is the expert. Go to the expert and just say, look, brand new, can you help me navigate the waters? First thing I would advise in those groups, search the old conversations. Because if you want to invite somebody to be snarky, just give them a chance to say, yeah, have you done your research? We talked about this 3 days ago. But look at those old conversations, you'll glean a lot from those. And then anything that isn't covered, ask.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hi, just wondering, how do you balance between being a writer and also a publisher and business person if you're going down a self-publishing route, like filing an LLC and all that stuff?
Well, that's actually a good question. So, again, of the people that talked about writing a book in here, how many people raised their hands? Everybody raise your hand that raised their hand before writing a book. How many of these people, keep your hand up if you are really excited about doing marketing? Wow, that's actually pretty good. Normally when I talk to writers groups, almost all the hands go down. So the point is, and this is actually good that you bring this up, is that unfortunately, it's like any small business, right? You're going to have to wear multiple hats. But the cool thing is, like Scott says, there's been a lot of people that have gone through this process. And there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience already out there, people that have kind of cut their teeth and said, you know what, like blog tours. Anybody know what a blog tour is? Yeah, so basically it's like you go into these, different blogs, and I'm not a blog, So, and you give interviews on these various blogs trying to kind of drum. I haven't talked to a single author, and again, I hope I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, but I haven't talked to a single author that's done a blog tour that thought it was worth the time and the money. So anyway, there's a lot of things out there that people have done, and there's a lot of experience out there that you can benefit from. But you're going to have to wear multiple hats, just like a small business owner, right? You're going to have to learn how to do a little bit of marketing, maybe a little bit of advertising. You're going to have to, help get your own covers created, find somebody to help you do the copy editings. But the good news is that there's a lot of people out there that will help you do it. But you have to be ready to wear those hats.
Also, I think hiring, I use this term loosely, hiring the right people is really going to help you if you're not a business person. And what I mean by hiring is sometimes I mean bartering. There's a lot of authors who are working other jobs. And think about how many CPAs there are out there who really want to be writing. Well, whatever your expertise is, you can partner with them and say, because look, I don't do my own taxes. I've always send it out to somebody else to prepare them professionally, because I could get in trouble if I was trying to, what I don't know could hurt me. It's the same thing in many avenues of business. Find somebody who's an expert in the field that you need. You need help with marketing, you need help with, with your taxes, whatever it is. Find somebody, either a friend of yours that you can trade services until you can actually then hire the professional. But, there's a learning curve with every new skill that you're gonna have to master as a business person. Don't be afraid to lean on other people. Because I'll tell you, my business took off when I hired Gina. When I started hiring, I've got my tax guy. I've got a guy who does book covers for me. I got my own editor. I didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. Focus on what you do best. Try to partner with other people who can help you with the stuff you don't do best.
Did that help you? Okay, great.
Good.
Okay, well, what's the number one takeaway? Don't do wrong covers. Okay, I got to make, the repeat thing, got to make sure you learn
We're
something.
making progress.
Okay, next.
I do have a question, but I just want to throw out something about the publishing, small publishers that you mentioned. Now, as you said, there's good advice and bad advice, so I'll leave that to you to decide. If you're trying to small publisher or a publisher that's asking for money up front, I would just Google them and put absolute right at the end or writer beware, because those are forms that are very good, and they generally vet not only, they have lots of forms not just about agents, but about small publishers. So
Great.
That's great, yeah.
a shot. The question that I've got is, a lot of people do go into self-publishing because traditional doesn't have the space on the shelf, or it doesn't fit neatly in traditional, whereas it might thrive in self-publishing. For something that might involve, do you have specific resources for where to find the best marketing strategy for some of these more, not niche areas, but areas that do thrive for new adults, as far as category in fantasy, or quieter protagonists, quieter books like that. So I guess the question is there a space where we might be able to find information on how to see proven marketing strategies for some of these more niche areas?
For
As opposed to-
self-published or for traditional published?
For self-published, because you can't copy really another method that well if it's for a completely different kind of book.
Right.
Well, so here's the funny thing is the operative phrase, I think, in what you just said, or the operative term is proven marketing strategies. Right?
There is no such thing.
Yeah, it's very ambiguous. Some things, in fact, I'll tell you, some of the things that I did with my marketing 3 or 4 years ago probably wouldn't even work nearly as well today, because the landscape is always changing. So there's a lot of flexibility that you need to maintain. But I would say, rather than trying to find a method that somebody will tell you is proven, go with your gut, right? I mean, know that, for one, your job is probably, like I said, to try and get your books out on as many devices as possible. However you decide to do that is obviously up to you. There's a lot of ways to do it. There's a lot of sites that you can actually pay $50 and will advertise it, and you might get a few thousand downloads. Again, it's the long game. But these marketing tools, these marketing strategies or methods are always changing. So again, you may find that what you're doing today works really, really well, and it doesn't work that well later, because a lot of people and I'll tell you, this is a perfect example. Has anybody heard of the site called BookBub, where you actually, so it's a discounted site, you can advertise with them, right? So I gave away hundreds of thousands of copies using BookBub. Now BookBub's changed a lot of their policy, and you have a lot of authors now that are writing books, and now they're trying to get into BookBub. So now the competition is kind of crowding out, and so it's really hard to get on. It's much harder to get on there than it used to be, but there's a lot of smaller sites that can do this. But my point is that was working really, really well for me, but it doesn't work very well for me now because things have changed. But there's other ways that you can kind of do the same thing. As long as you are still trying to get to the same goal, don't worry about what path you are using to get there, because those paths will always change. And that's where Scott's saying, if you go out and you join these user groups, a lot of these people have gone through these, and they'll say, hey, man, this didn't work for me at all. Or, hey, have you guys tried this? I just did this promotion, and it rocked. It's a lot of advice that you can get that people have already kind of, path they've already taken, and they can tell you if it doesn't work.
I'll tell you one thing about BookBub. A friend of mine works with him a great deal in his line of work. He told me that, yes, it is very difficult to get your book approved, and the number one thing that you get disapproved for, and you get bounced right out, you won't even be considered, if you've made your own cover. It's absolutely true.
And if only there was a rule that we could give you that you would remember. Yeah, a bad cover. I mean, and here's the thing. Scott's right. If you go onto Amazon, because there's a lot of people that still do their own covers on Amazon, but they don't worry about BookBub or whatever. But you'll know a bad cover when you see it, right? And you will know a cover that's been done by somebody or their kid right away. It's a huge nod.
I saw a cover once that had been done on Fiverr. Really?
$5.
Oh, Fiverr. It sounded like you said fiber. I'm like, what the hell? I'm not Fiverr.
Avoid covers done on Fiverr.
Next.
For somebody just starting out, I've never done marketing at all. Where do you recommend even getting started?
Is your book done?
No, I'm in the process of writing.
Okay, so I have the marketing background here, the two boys. So I've been doing that for a really long time. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of easy things to remember. The number one rule of marketing is know your subject. Okay, so if you have a topic or a book or something, you need to know what's out there. Is it selling? And the second thing is you need to know your competition. So if there's something out there that's working or isn't working, then you can use that. And it's like what Scott was saying, you want to go after the people who are being successful at it and ask them. In the film industry, there's a big thing about asking people to be your mentor. There is nothing wrong with contacting a writer and saying, hey, listen, I am so impressed with that book that you wrote. Could you mentor me? Could I take you to coffee? Could you tell me how you got started? And you know what? 9 out of 10 times they're going to say yes. So before, I know you guys want to hear like all the answers all at once, but don't worry about marketing until your book's done.
Yes.
And you need to know, you need to know your book like, you're selling a used car or something. You need to know everything there is to know about your book. And like, I love Scott's idea about the Facebook groups and things like that. Get on them in your topic so that you know as you're finishing your book, and then you can see who's out there who's doing really well in your topic. Maybe you could team up. Maybe you could, write a book together. So you have to remember that the number one thing that's going to keep you above the static is you need a hook. So you need to be able to say, well, gosh, that guy wrote a book about a car, and that guy wrote a book about a car, but I'm going to write about a red car. You see what I mean? It's all about the hook. So what makes you different from the crowd? So if you can incorporate that in while you're writing, that's great. And then once you're done writing, I'd say go and look for a mentor. Go look for somebody who's doing what you want to do in that genre well.
I'm concentrating on short stories.
Short stories?
Yeah, there's categories. There's a lot of categories on Amazon where you can sell short stories. But I totally agree with Gina. Actually, if you can get started now in some of these Facebook groups or just groups all over the web, you don't have to be super active in it. Just listen to what they're saying, right? So over the time while you're finishing your book, you're going to pick up a lot of tips, a lot of information that you'll want to know when it's time to start working on marketing. But priority one is to get the book done. Because if the book is never done, it doesn't matter what you learn on the marketing front. I love your costume, by the way.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
So, I do writing and acting. So my question is, how good or bad of an idea is it to possibly narrate my own work?
What, take jobs away from me, you bastard?
I knew. I thought there might be some pushback on this question.
No. Actually, that's a wonderful question. I get asked a lot. I say, what do you feel? How do you feel about author reads? And it's so funny within the narrator community. My girlfriend's here; she's a narrator as well, and we, I laugh whenever I read online in Facebook groups. People complaining about like authors doing their own work. I heard somebody years ago talking about like Canadians come down here and taking our jobs. I'm like, this sounds exactly the same to me. Guess what? It's their book. They get to do it if they want. You know, there's something wonderful. You know your authorial voice.
Oh,
you
yeah.
live your authorial voice. This is a melding of the authorial voice and the oral voice.
And I have
so
the training
do
to
it.
back it up.
Exactly.
I can bring in a director to give me feedback and things like that.
Look at the best audiobook narrator, the best author narrators that I've ever listened to.
Okay.
The three best: Harlan Ellison, William Peter Blatty, who wrote The Exorcist, and Orson Scott Card. They were all actors to begin with. Go and do likewise.
Thank you.
Hello there. Yep. So, I do apologize. I missed the first 9 minutes, and so I didn't hear what you were saying about Amazon in the very, very beginning.
Everything that you need to know happened in the first 9 minutes. I'm sorry, that's all right.
Yeah.
Highlight, don't do your own cover.
That's the takeaway. Rule number one.
Thank you.
Now, so, I'm sorry, was that really the question as far as?
I really want to hear what you were most of my minutes.
Okay, yeah, and we'll be outside afterwards if you want to stick around. Sure.
Good evening. Authorial voice. So, you worked with Scott in getting him to narrate your books, that's correct?
I beg him to narrate my books, that's right.
So, how much input do you give him as far as that voice? Like, your inflection was a little off in this one, can you please correct it? Or do you even get to make the decision because he's making those choices as an narrator?
I've got full decision-making authority, but it's Scott Brick. And I'm not trying to be funny. Scott is the number one guy in the narration industry. So I don't think I could give him a lot of advice. In fact, he usually gives me advice. When I say, hey, what if we focus on this and this and this? There's been several times he says, you know what? I'm here to tell you, I've done many, many books and that does not work. And I said, okay, great. But yeah, I mean, as an author, you have full authority to say, hey, I'd like you to do this, or I'd like you to do that. It really depends on how much faith you have in the person that's doing it. I've got 110% faith in Scott. But who you go with, you might actually pick somebody who's a little more affordable, maybe has a little less experience, and or you just want to have a little bit more of that input. There's nothing wrong with that. Just like anything, be objective enough to maybe be wrong. Yeah.
The thing about an audiobook is that it's something that didn't used to exist, obviously, in terms of technology, but also just in the olden days, you had the author's words and the reader's brain, and the only thing in between them were the reader's eyes, right? Everything was happening, the interpretation was happening in their brain. Now we've got the author's words and the listener's brain, and in between is not just their ears, but me. I'm the construct. I am interpreting the book. My advice to you is to find a narrator, do your research, and really listen to a lot of books that narrator has done, or at least samples from a lot of books. Audible, they'll let you listen to 5 minutes of every book that a narrator has done, and trust them that their interpretation will be close enough to what you want. There's always going to be times where you're going to go, I would have read that line differently. Well, sure, but it's an interpretation. Hopefully you can find somebody you trust to interpret your work correctly.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's me. My question is for people who are trying to decide between going traditional publishing or self-publishing route. As you mentioned, a lot of times traditional publishing methods take a long time to break into. If you're doing that, trying to do that route, is it harmful to self-publish while you're trying to reach out to the standard publishers?
I think there's a common misconception among the crowd or the conventional wisdom that will say that you can do yourself harm. And maybe you can in some ways, but I will tell you that there's a lot of authors out there that have gained or established relationships with agents and publishers because they self-publish. And it's because that they were actually good enough at writing and good enough at marketing that they showed they have a viable product and they make a decent amount of money off it. So it's a proven product line when you show it to an agent or a publisher, myself included. I had published, I think I had sold about 500,000 books over the course of 3 or 4 years, and that's what got me on a call with an agent. And it was a very different conversation because it wasn't like, hey, can you please take a look at this and let me know what you think. It was basically, he says, yeah, this looks pretty good. I'll send you some paperwork. I mean, it was, so yeah, you can improve your chances of going the traditional route. And maybe it's not with the books that you actually self-publish, because those are already self-published, and publishers are a little reticent to actually take on those because they already have kind of this market established and they already sold a bunch of books. But your future book is something that could very well turn into a traditional contract. Sure.
Just so you guys know, we have 10 minutes left, so we're going to try and blow through.
Thank you for being here. Quick question. You mentioned some of Amazon's marketing tools that are available if you go with them exclusively. Would you talk a little bit about using Amazon ads, Facebook ads, and how you know whether your marketing campaign is working? What metric you also mentioned that they change, and
right.
What worked for you 4 years ago doesn't work now.
Yeah, I'll speak briefly to this because there's a lot of information there, but I will say that the first thing I did was I did these promotions using the free promotional tools from Amazon to give away as many books as I could. At a certain point, you want to start advertising, right? I mean, the problem is advertising costs money. And so if you're not making money on it, and you said, how do you determine, with the metrics and stuff, how do you determine how well it's working? If you're losing money, it's not working, right? And I'm not trying to be facetious, but I mean, if you put, $1,000 into advertising over the course of a couple months and you make $500, then there's a problem, right? So, and it's the same thing advertising for any product, right? If you are spending more money advertising and getting back, then it's a problem. So you have to try and find out how to spend less on the ads, and so there's a whole nuance to that. But Facebook ads is another option. I will say though, I've talked to people that have made money using Facebook ads for different products. I've never talked to an author who's made money using Facebook ads because they're too expensive and the markup on a book is relatively small. I would love to be able to tap into the Facebook advertising, but I've never, ever been able to make it work. But that, advertising is a lot of money. Let me just say one thing that I wanted to tell everybody before this. I want to make sure that I mention this before we run out of time. There was 2 rules I told you: don't make your own cover. The second is don't copy edit. You should edit your own. The third is, how many people in here that want to write a book think they have a pretty thick skin? All right, you don't. And the reason I say I thought I had pretty thick skin too. And I want to warn you and prepare you that when you put your book up on Amazon, whether it's through a publisher or whether it's self-publishing, you're going to get a lot of bad reviews, right? And granted, I get many good reviews, so it outweighs it, but those negative reviews are devastating because these people can get really nasty. They can it's like that whole anonymous problem, right? When somebody has anonymity, they feel that they can say kind of anything. I've had people literally say, this guy writes like a 14-year-old. I've had people, in fact, I've had somebody write me pardon my language, but I've had people write me an email saying, you're a piece of shit. I'm spitting on you. Because of one line that I put in my book that was controversial. So be ready and don't take it. It's because it's so easy to focus on the negative reviews, man. It's really, really dangerous. But I'm here to tell you, your job is to ignore the negative reviews. Read the positive reviews over and over and over again, because those things are like jet fuel for your emotions. So anyway, I'm sorry.
Speaking of a Facebook group, sorry to interrupt. There was a Facebook group years ago called Scott Brick's Voice is like nails on a chalkboard. And that cracked me up, so I joined it. And they folded, because it's not cool when the person you hate thinks it's funny.
Wait, hold on one second. I just wanted to say before everybody runs out of the room, if anybody here is interested, Scott has his own recordings that we sell. We have coupons. So if that doesn't sound a little self-serving, I just wanted to let you guys know. So Susie right there in the corner has the coupons. So before everybody runs out, if you guys are interested, thank you. Okay, next.
Regarding audible books, do you ever have a situation, has it ever been done, and would it ever be done, to use 2 or 3 different artists? So you get like a child's voice, a woman's voice, and a man's voice.
Well, Suzanne Freeman, who also, it happens a lot in romance, where a lot of books are going to be written from 2 points of view, a man and a woman. And so they'll hire a man to do the appropriate sections and a woman to do the others. So yes, that happens all the time.
So your second big takeaway, don't do your own copy editing. What is your advice about finding an editor?
Talk to other authors who have a good one.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Talk to other authors. We're usually very, very happy to refer you to the people that we use. And if you, here's the other thing. If you find a good editor, and then as you publish and you get your book out there, make sure that you got a website where you list your email in the back so people can email you. Because what's going to happen is that these people are going to email you over, again, it's a marathon, so it'll take time, but as more and more people email you, you'll have people say, God, I loved your book. I absolutely loved your book. I'd love to be a beta reader. And a beta reader, if you don't know, is somebody who actually reads your book before it's final, and they can help you find problems. What's awesome about developing, keeping a beta reader list, these people will not just help you for free. So you go through your editor and they can find a whole other set of issues that even your editor didn't miss, because nobody's perfect, right? But then you slowly but surely start to get super beta readers or super readers. And those people are not just beta readers, they are evangelists. And you cannot pay for people like that will go out and want to tell everybody. So make sure that you have set things up in a way that people can contact you, and you're keeping all the emails, and anybody who mentions anything about helping you out or doing a beta reader, they're like gold.
Okay, I have the quickest of questions for Scott.
Yeah.
In terms of recording, obviously you read the book first, but how many times do you rehearse before you before you do your final recording?
I'd say as many times as it takes to memorize it. I'm kidding. I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. Typically, all you have time for is once.
Okay.
But if there's a section that's going to be particularly challenging, then do that scene as many times as it takes to feel comfortable with it. But most narrators I know, working narrators I know, that you've only have one time through.
So you read it once and then you record it once?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got the wrap up signal. So is it a quick question?
Quick comment.
Okay. Yeah.
You say not to design your own book cover. I design your book covers.
Nice. Do you have
There
this
you
first?
go.
There you go.
Talk to that guy. Nice. Well done. That's marketing.
Well, we hope that you guys.
I'm just gonna say one thing real quick. If you're like me, you spend a lot of time in this room over the convention. Jim Lee comes into this room and teaches you how to draw. Authors come in here, they tell you how to write. This is part of the how-to panel, and there are so many volunteers that are they're indefatigable. Jennifer over here is one of them. Clyde Lee, Javier. If you like anything, whether you like this panel or not, if you like anything in this room throughout this con, please go ahead and give feedback on the SDCC website, and say specifically, thank you for the how-to. Please bring back more of it. It's invaluable, the things I have learned in this room over the years. So.
And thank you so much for coming. We hope that we helped you just a little bit, and we'll be outside if you have more questions. Thank you. Have fun with the